Daria, are you sharing my screen?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Shall I start?
Yes, start.
Yes, start. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Myself Hiral Kashyap, and today I will talk about neoclassical era. Next slide. Next. Okay. Johann Joachim Winckelmann neoclassicism began in Rome as Johann Joachim Winckelmann thought on the imitation of Greek works in painting and sculpture played a leading role in establishing the atheistic theory of neoclassicism. Next. Neoclassical literature was written between 1660 and 1798. This time period is broken down into three parts: the Restoration period, the Augustan period, and the Age of Johnson. Writer of Neoclassical period tried to imitate the style of Romans and Greeks. So, Neoclassical literature was written between 1660 and 1798. After the Renaissance, a period of exploration and expensive came a reaction in the direction of order and restraint. Generally speaking, this reaction developed in France in the mid of 17th century and in England 30 years later, and it dominated European literature until the last part of the 18th century. Next. Okay. Neoclassicism is a term related to artistic and creative movements that reflect qualities and Greek and Roman philosophy, culture, and art. Although the classical Greek and Roman lived thousands of years ago, they championed ideas like order, balance, and restraint that had lasting influence. Neoclassical architecture was based on the principle of simplicity, symmetry, and mathematics, which were seen as a virtue of the art in ancient Greece and Rome. It also evolved the more recent influence of the quality and antiquity informed 16th century Renaissance classicism. These are the key points. The height of neoclassicism coined with the 18th century and Enlightenment era and continued into early 19th century. With the increasing popularity of Grand Tour, it became fashionable to collect antiquities as souvenirs, which spread the neoclassical style through Europe and America. Neoclassicism spanned all of the arts, including painting, sculpture, decorative arts, theater, literature, music and architecture. Generally speaking, neoclassicism is defined stylistically by its use of straight lines, minimal use of color, simplicity of form, and of course, an uh, adherence of classical values and techniques. Ne- uh, Neoclassical architecture was based on the principle of simplicity, symmetry, and mathematics, which were seen as a virtue of the art in ancient Greek and Rome. It also involved more recent influence of the quality and antiquity informed in 16th century. Writers turned from inventing new words to regularizing vocabulary and grammar, complex, boldly metaphorical language, such as Shakespeare used his major tragedies, is clarified and simplified using fewer and more conventional figure of speech. The ideal style is lucid, polished, and precisely appropriate to the genre of work and the social position of its character. Tragedy and high comedy, for example, uses the language of cultivated people and maintain a well-bred tone. Neoclassicism, uh, Neoclassicism spanned all of the arts, including painting, sculpture, decorative arts, theater, literature, music, and architecture. Generally speaking, Neoclassicism is defined stylistically by its use of straight lines, minimal use of color, simplicity of form and of course an adherence of classical values and techniques. So here is the example of that painting. Next slide. Okay. While Renaissance, the social themes, while Renaissance writers were sometimes fascinated by rebel and later romantic artists often glorified them, neoclassical artists expected people to conform to established social norms. So, neoclassical writers saw themselves as well as their readers and characters above all as members of society, while Renaissance writers were sometimes fascinated by rebel and later romantic artists often glorified them. Neoclassical artists expected people to conform to established social norms, for individual opinion was far less likely to be true than was the consumed to society, developed over time and embodied in custom and tradition, as the rule of proper writing should be followed. Next, the new restraint. Writer turned from inventing new words to regularizing vocabulary and grammar. Writers turned from inventing new words to regularizing vocabulary and grammar. Complex, boldly metaphorical language, such as Shakespeare used in his major tragedies, is clarified and simplified using fewer and more conventional figures of speech. Mystery and obscurity are considered symptoms of incompetence rather than the sign of grandeur. The structure like tone becomes more simple and unified. In contrast to Shakespeare's play, those of neoclassical playwrights such as Racine and Molière develop a single plot line and are strictly limited time and place. So to us, so the to a single setting and single day a time. Next. Influence of classes. The period is called neoclassical because its writer looked back to the ideals and art form of classical times, emphasizing even more than their uh, predecessors the classical ideal of order and rational control. So, the period called neoclassical because its writer looked back to the ideal and art forms of classic times. Their respect for the past led them to conservative both in art and politics, always aware the convention appropriate in to each genre. The modeled their work on classical masterpiece and heeded the rules thought to be laid down by classical critics. In political and social affairs too, they were guided by the wisdom of past and uh, traditional traditional instituted had least survived the test of time. No more than it was better to set a moderate goal, whether in art or society, and achieve is well than to strive to infinite ideal and fail. Reasonable, reasonable feeling. Okay. Reasonable feeling the misanthrope does not get angry at people injustice because he accepts human nature as imperfect. Next. Age of Reason. The 18th century neoclassicism, the Augustan age, the transition or pre-romantic age, the 18th century is known as the age of enlightenment or the age of reason, to stress the rational trend of the period and the attitude according to which reason and judgment should be the guiding principle for human activities. And indeed, it is often known as the age of reason, had traditionally been assumed to be the highest mental faculty, but that in this period, may thinkers considered it a sufficient guide in all areas. Both religion, belief, and morality were grounded on a reason. Revelation and grace were de-emphasized, and morality consists of acting rightly to one's fellow begin on this earth. As a reason should guide human individual and society, it should also direct artistic creation. Neoclassical art is not meant to seem a spontaneous outpouring of emotion or imagination. Emotion appear, of course, but it is conceptually controlled. Its hero and his society are judged according to their conformity or lack of conformity to reasons, and its ideal voiced by Philint in the reasonable of the golden mean. So sharp and brilliant wit produced within the clearly defined ideals of neoclassical art and focused on people their social context make this perhaps the world's greatest age of comedy and satire. Next. There are some neoclassical writers and their works, like John Milton from 1608 to 1674, and his work is Paradise Lost. John Dryden from 1631 to 1700, and his work is To My Lord Chancellor and Marriage in La Mode. Alexander Pope, 1688 to 1744, translation of the Iliad, pastorals, and an essay on criticism. Jonathan Swift from 1667 to 1745, Gulliver's Travel. Daniel Defoe from 1660 to 1731, Robinson Crusoe. Cruise. Samuel Johnson 1709 from 1784, A Dictionary of the English Language. Next.